Fixing a faulty computer can be pretty hard, but you know what's even worse? Trying to fix a computer that someone attempted and failed to fix before. Some of you might recognize this space. I'm now in Spain for a few weeks, and this is the lab where the channel got started. As soon as I got to Spain, some of my friends asked me if I could have a look at their computers because they weren't working and they were waiting for me to fix it. So I agreed to it, and one of my friends handed me this Amstrad CPC 464 with supposedly some weird video issues. At first I thought it wasn't going to be worth it even of a video because really most repairs are just not all that interesting. But this one actually ended up being somewhat interesting. And to make things maybe worse or more interesting, this is something that somebody had definitely been here. They had definitely repaired some things and broken a few other things. And repairing things that other people have previously fixed is one of the most challenging things because you never know what to expect. You can't use logic to know this is likely to fail or this is not likely to fail. You just don't know. So today, I'm gonna attempt to go in where other people have failed and try to fix other people's bad repairs. Normally we'd start testing the current draw, but since my friend already said that this is working, let's just turn it on and see what happens. Oh wow, that is very weird. That looks like the bottom part of every character is repeated on top, right? Right, so that's ready, and you see the bottom of ready, but then on top you see the repeated one, exactly the top half of each character. Now, the Amstrad does not have a character-based graphics mode, so this is just purely bitmap. So I don't believe this is a character, I mean, it could be a character ROM issue. That's very unlikely, I suppose. I mean, there's no character ROM, but it could be a ROM issue, but just so weird that everything would work, but that, I mean, I'm assuming it would work, yeah. So I'm assuming this is a display issue. One thing I could try is actually, just to make sure that it's not something else, I could try writing some kind of a pixel, set a pixel color at the beginning of the screen, and then if it's just a duplication of some rows, I should see it duplicated again. So let me just set the board. Oh. So the keyboard is also mostly not working. That's going to make it more difficult. Okay. So yeah, just a few keys are working. Membranes on the Amstrad CPC 464 don't usually fail. So that's kind of weird. Space is not even working. Yeah. Maybe it's really dirty. Let's open up the keyboard and see if I can fix the membrane, and if not, we'll have to run the test in a different way. Right, so this is the cost down version of the board. Interesting, all the RAM chips are socketed, and it has a burnt EEPROM. So yeah, definitely some stuff has been happening here already. Oh, so the keyboard is bent in there. Yeah, I noticed that the space was a little sunk in. I wonder if somebody got really mad and smashed this. But even so, that shouldn't break the membrane. This is not like the ZX Spectrum one that after some years, it eventually just fails. So let's open it up. Oh, wow, yeah. Check that out, totally bent. Somebody got really mad at a game. One of the brackets holding some of the keys is loose. Oh yeah, the enter key. No big deal. And the membrane apparently seems fine. The things I'm looking for is just that it's not brittle, that it's flexible and shiny, and yeah, I mean, it has a little bit of dust, but nothing special, nothing to justify it not working like that, like we saw. I wonder if we can bend this back. Oh yeah, look at that. Wow.
it's perfectly flat again. Almost. Nothing looks wrong in here. I'm just gonna give it a quick brush and reassemble that and try the keyboard again. It just occurred to me that maybe the problem was just purely a mechanical one. If the keyboard was really bent that way, maybe the membrane was just too far for the keystrokes to make enough contact in them. And that's why they were just not registering. That would be nice if that's it. All right, I need to hold the keyboard in here. Oh, we got space. Yeah, we got all the keys. Wow, so that was just the membrane being too far and not making contact. Okay, that's good. Let's do the test for the screen now. Okay, so let's try drawing a little pixel on the top left corner and seeing if we get duplicate ones. I'm gonna change the blur color so we see what we're doing. And then the top left corner will be address C000. And I'll just do 255 in there. Oh, right, we don't see anything. I guess that's probably enough of a test because it is in the top part of every character row, it's drawing the bottom part. So if I draw a pixel halfway through the top character row, chances are it will show up both there and there. So the Amstrad video mode is really bizarre, and I'll probably have a video about it someday. Every line is spaced 800 hex, and every character is 8 pixels tall. So 800 times 4, so that's just 2000. So it would be poke and then DE and 255. And if it all goes well, we should see 2 pixels lighting up. There we go. Yeah, so it is exactly doing that. It's independently of the characters or anything. It is just repeating the bottom row of each of those character rows on the top. So the way the video signal is generated on the Amstrad CPC is between the video controller and the gate array. The video controller, or the CRTC, what it does is it decides what address needs to be shown in the screen at every time. And so every so often, so very quickly, it generates different addresses. Those addresses get sent through those gates and they get sent to the RAM. And then the gate array knows that that is happening because it has a few control signals with the CRTC. It knows that the data in the data bus at a certain point corresponds to what needs to be shown on the screen. And then it goes ahead and it generates that RGB signal. It's definitely not the RAM because BASIC is working and everything is fine. I doubt it's the gate array because again, everything is really working. So it's either the CRTC, which I think is a little unlikely, or more likely, it's going to be one of those multiplexers that it's just not getting the right address line from the controller and maybe sending a 0 all the time. And so that's why we're getting that repeated pattern. Let's actually take a moment and really understand what exactly those multiplexers are doing. Not only is that going to help us diagnose the problem better, but I just like to know exactly what's going on in a circuit like this, especially something fairly fundamental to the whole architecture of the Amstrad like these multiplexers. The Z80 is an 8-bit CPU with a 16-bit addressing space. So whenever it needs to read from or write to a memory location, it'll put that address on the 16-bit address bus. However, the RAM ICs used in the Amstrad and in most of other similar computers, to save on costs and space, can only take 8 bits of an address space at a time. The way they work is that they expect half of the full address bits when a signal is enabled, RAS, or row address signal, and it remembers those bits. Then the other half of the address is put at the inputs while another signal, CAS, or column address signal, is enabled. At that point, the IC has the full information about the address and it can do the read or write operation. You can find all of this described in great detail in the 4164 DRAM datasheet, and it's actually really important to understand it if you're ever going to interface with that kind of DRAM directly with your circuits, or even from an Arduino or some other kind of microcontroller. Anyway, the point is that the CPU is putting out all 16 bits at once, but the RAM expects 8 bits at a time. How do we solve that? With the multiplexers. Each multiplexer takes 2 address bits, and then we can use a combination of RAS and CAS signals to select one group or the other. But wait, we're not done. Because video memory on the Amstrad is just mapped into system RAM, and the CRTC needs to put addresses on the bus,
we need another way to select either the CPU address lines or the CRTC ones. Easy! We just extend the multiplexers to take 4 different inputs, 2 address bits from the CPU and 2 address bits from the CRTC. Since the gate array knows all about the global timings of the system, it'll control which of the 2 is currently selected, and then it'll control whether it's the RAS or CAS half that gets passed through. So with all of that in mind, let's go and look at those multiplexers on the bench and see what exactly is failing.
So before looking at the board, actually thinking about it, I was looking at the schematics, and we are getting some confusion with bit 13 because C000 really was read as E000, so that's bit 13. And looking at the memory demultiplexing, bit 13 is this one. So our suspect is IC 104, which is this one right here. So actually, as I was setting this up, I realized that it can be that the multiplexer the output is constantly high because all the addresses go through here to go to RAM. So then all the CPU addresses would also have that bit set. So that means there's no way we could boot into BASIC or anything like that. So it has to be that the output only fails when it comes from a particular input, or maybe the input is just wrong and the CRTC is not sending the correct signals. Let's go check it out. Let's start with let's start with that one that we hope is okay. Okay, yeah, there's activity there, that seems fine. And 12, yep, that also seems fine. And now we go to the one that we suspect might be faulty. That one looks fine. It's just lower frequency because this is kind of like a counter. It's just going through all the addresses. So some of them are going to be higher frequency than others. Oh, but that one doesn't look good at all. That one looks like it's floating and it should definitely have some activity there. So, and this is corresponding to A13. So this is exactly the bit that we thought was incorrect. So that's interesting. So it may not be the gate itself, but maybe it's a CRTC or maybe a trace connecting the two. We'll check that later. Let me check that other one on top. Maybe that's high. That seems a little weird. Yeah, maybe they're high. Maybe they're constantly high. So the 2 most significant bits are probably not changing because the screen address is always in the highest 16K block. So the 2 highest bits are just not changing. So it's the lower 14 ones that are changing. And just for completeness, let's check the least significant one. Right, so this is really high frequency because it's like every bit, every address is changing. And that one is also pretty high frequency. Okay, so yeah, I mean, bit 13, A13 looks bad. Let's see how it looks at the output of the CRTC. So that one is pin 36 right here. Oh, and in the CRTC, that looks fine. So maybe it's just the trace. I mean, it's definitely the trace. And that might have happened when they socketed these RAM chips. That might have been it. I'm just gonna check continuity to make sure that all the other ones are fine, especially the higher multiplexer. Yeah, so it looks like it's just the trace connecting the output of the CRTC for address 13. Let's take out the board and see what happened there. Oh wow, so maybe I should have looked at this before. I mean, clearly lots of signs of rework, some bridges there and there. Clearly the ROM was replaced like we saw. All the RAM chips. Now I have to say the soldering looks okay. The doesn't look horrible. So I guess they might have had a problem desoldering things and they just pulled a few traces. And I even have a video on some Amstrad board showing how easy it is to rip some of those. So I don't blame them, other than not fixing it. Yeah, there's some strange stuff going on in here because this, it almost looks like it was reflowed. There's some actually really ugly blob in there. In any case, 12, so 9, 10, 11, 12, the trace for this pin is on the other side, so we can't see it through here. This one goes to, we said 36, which is that one. So yeah, they're completely on the other side. And I know I've said it before, and I will say it 100 more times. I love how on Amstrad boards, they label every 5th pin. It's just so useful. Yeah, so you see it through here. That line goes up. So yeah, it is surprising. It doesn't go anywhere near the RAM chips and the sockets, but they must have damaged that in some of that reflowing they did there, unless they replaced those. Oh, wait. How come I didn't see this before? This chip is different than the other one. Oh, duh, okay. So yeah, they probably replaced this one without a socket for some reason, and they pulled a trace. That's what it is. So I think the safest thing to do is just to make the connection ourselves directly. I'm not gonna pull it out, but we can just connect that to that and be done. Okay, let's try it. Yes, that's the way it's supposed to be. So it was just that trace that wasn't connected correctly. So let's actually take it one step beyond this to make sure that we completely understand what's happening. Before we were getting the bottom part of the character repeated on top because this particular multiplexer was outputting a 1 when it should have been outputting a 0. So just for fun, I'm going to change this and tie it to ground now. So if I understand it correctly, we should be able to see the upper part of each character row repeated at the bottom. So let's try that, and then I'll use that as an excuse to fix this cable, which ended up not being a particularly good job. So I'm just gonna tie it to ground right in the same chip. That's good enough for now, and let's try it. And there you go, that's exactly what we're expecting. You see the top part of the ready characters, and then on the bottom half, you can see ready again. Obviously the cursor never changes since that's symmetrical, but yeah, okay, so we know exactly what's going on with those multiplexers. As a quick final test, I'm going to run the diagnostics ROM from a detonator. Yeah, so it looks like it passed. Oh, interesting. The ROM is detected as a 664. Oh, that must have been the custom ROM that the board had. Yep, it even says it on the label. I totally missed it. Probably the only reason they did that maybe was to get to some of the basic fixes, and like there's a couple new features on the 664 basic. But yeah, I hadn't noticed that. I guess if I had known my versions better, that might have probably indicated that this is the 664 one, and probably the 6128 is a V3. So that's interesting. Of course, a problem with the 664 ROM is that it's only available in English, and this computer has a Spanish keyboard. So when you press some keys, you get different symbols. That is definitely less than ideal. So I was planning on replacing this with another EEPROM and burning the correct Spanish 464 ROM, but then I realized that the 464 is compatible with the 6128 ROM, which is pretty much very, very similar to this one, and there is a Spanish version, and I happen to have spare ones. So I think I'm just gonna pop that one in, and you get the best of both worlds. You get the slightly enhanced basic and the Spanish keyboard, so everything behaves correctly. So there you go. This is version 3, so that's the 6128, and the S in front is the Spanish version. So if I press the ñ key, there we go. We get the special characters, and we get the special symbols over the right key. So yeah, this is perfect like this. So that Amstrad is now fully working, which is great, but my friend also handed me this other Amstrad at the same time. And to make things worse, he said this one is not working at all, and he tried doing a bunch of repairs to this one and couldn't get it to work. So I don't know what's in here. I'm kind of scared to open it, but I'm not gonna get to it today. I will try to fix it, and if it's something interesting enough, I will go ahead and make another video. So I will see you then.